All right, today we're going to use function notation to describe rules for part 2. All right, so I want you to evaluate each of these if P is 7, 100, or Q is 12, or Q is 60 in the equation Q equals 4 plus 8/10 P. All right, so if you're evaluating these, if we want to know what value Q would make when P is 7, we would just plug 7 into the equation where P is, and you should have gotten 9.6. And so to do that, it would have just looked like Q equals 4 plus 0.8 times 7. And if you multiply 7 by 8/10 and then add 4, you get 9.6. All right, for P is 100, you would have done the same thing and gotten 84. For finding P when Q is 12, well, we now know Q is 12, so we would have had 12 equals 4 plus 8/10 P, and you would have to solve like a two-step equation. So you would subtract 4 from both sides and divide by 8/10 to get P by itself. 8. Okay. And you would have gotten 10. You would do the same thing with 60 and solve for P, and you should have gotten 70. All right. Okay, so our problem today that we're going to look at is a college student is choosing between two data plans. She's got option A and option B represented by the equations shown. Each plan allows her to have 2 gigabytes of data, and we're going to kind of investigate these plans to see which one is the best. So if the student is trying to decide between the two plans, she's going to look at how much different data would cost. So for function A, if we want to look at 1 additional gigabyte of data, that would be 3 gigabytes of data because X represents the number of gigabytes over the allowable amount, which is 2. So we would just plug 1 into the function. And since function A is just A of X equals 60, A of 1 would equal 60. And so that's telling us that 1 additional gigabyte of data costs $60. For function B, B of X was equal to 10X plus 25. So we would just plug 1 into that function and solve for X. So B of 1 would equal 10 times 1 plus 25. And that would give us $35. So for 1 additional gigabyte, your plan would cost $35 for that month. What about 7.5? So if we use 9.5 gigabytes of data, we would plug in 7.5 because that is 7.5 more than 2 gigabytes that were allowed. So you would do the same thing. Well, you see that A of 7.5 is still $60. And B of 7.5, we would have B of 7.5 equals 10 times 7.5 plus 25. And you solve for that, and 10 times 7.5 is 75 plus 25 is 100. So then we kind of need to break these down to describe them in words so that we can tell what we're talking about. If you're looking at 1 gigabyte extra and 7.5 gigabytes extra for plan A, both of them are going to cost you $60. So that plan isn't changing. You're going to have a fixed rate of $60 no matter how many gigabytes you use that month. With option B, though, we're going to be charged $10 for each additional gigabyte plus a $25 fee. And so that's additional gigabytes on top of the 2 that you get with the plan. All right, over here I've graphed this for you. So option A is the function A of X equals 60. And if we're looking at that on a graph, there is no slope here. So we just have a y-intercept of 60, and it's going to be a horizontal line across right here, because no matter how many gigabytes of data that we use, 1, 2, 5, 20, we're only going to pay $60. Where with option B, we have B of X equals 10x plus 25. Our y-intercept is at 25, and our slope is 10, so it's going up 10 over 1 for our slope, and you can see that it's going up at a steady rate. So which plan do you think she should choose? Well, it makes a difference if we're only using, let's see here. We can look where these two lines cross right here, and that's at 3.5. So that would tell us that we're using 5.5 gigabytes of data. So if you used 5.5 gigabytes of data, it would be in your best interest to choose option B because you're going to pay less. Why? If you're only using 4 gigabytes of data on a regular basis, wouldn't you rather pay $45 than $60? I would. So it would be cheaper for you to pay for plan B instead of plan A. But if you're going to use more than 5.5 gigabytes of data, option A would be in your best interest because after you use more than 5.5 gigabytes of data, you're still only going to pay $60. It doesn't matter how many you use, you're still going to be paying $60. Okay. Yes, I can move that. So what if the person only had $50 to spend? So if she only has $50 to spend, that counts option A out completely because she doesn't have $60 to pay for the plan. So we can figure out how many gigabytes she could use per month without going over her budget. So on the graph, you would look at where $50 was on the graph and go over to see where it hits the line and go down, and you can see it's at 2.5. And so she would be able to use 4.5 gigabytes a month and only pay $50. A second way that you can figure that out is by plugging it into the equation. So setting 50 equal to the 10x plus 25, you can solve for x by subtracting 25 from both sides. And then dividing by 10. And that would give you x equals 2.5. And you would add the original 2 gigabytes of data that came with the plan. All right, so there's another way that we can kind of look at this, and that's through graphing, because we're talking about gigabytes of data. And sometimes those aren't all cut and dry numbers like 6 or 2 or 3. Sometimes they look more like 1.482. And so that might be a little more gruesome if we had to do it by hand all the time. So we can graph those. And we can just type the function into the calculator. So we have b of x equals 10 plus 10x plus 25. And I can see the graph. We can even change the x and y intervals here so that we can see it a little clearer with what we want. So now we can see that graph more how it was on the slide before. If I want to know when I use 6 gigabytes of data, I could just type in b of 6. And it tells me that it would cost $85. If I wanted to know b of 7.5, I could type in 2.75. And it tells me that it's 52.5. And then 1.482 will also tell me it's 39.82. Okay, so if we know the cost that we're going to spend, we can figure out how many gigabytes of data we can spend or we can use that month without going over that budget. And so if we were paying $93, I can just write a new equation as b of x equals 93, and it draws the line on me and it graphs the line on the graph for me. And I can look at the point of intersection to see how many gigabytes of data I would use. And you can see that it's 6.8. Okay, what if I only want to pay 42.10? Just change that number to 42.10. And you can see that it is at 1.71. And $116.25 would allow you go up a little bit, would allow you to use 9.125 gigabytes of data. So we can figure out these problems by graphing them, solving the equations, either way, as long as you understand what's going on. So hopefully this helps you. If you have any questions, you can go back and let me know if you need any help.